Hello everybody, thank you so much for joining us today. I'm Robin Porter and I've got the honour to be the Chief Executive for Luton Council.
And I am Andy Malcolm. I'm a local councillor and I have responsibility for finance on Luton Borough Council.
And today we're going to talk through this year's budget process. Thank you so much for sending in the questions that you have done. We can't get to them all today, but they will be dealt with as part of the budget process and addressed. Thank you also for contributing your ideas. This is a continuation of the discussion that we started in June when we were forced to put in place our emergency budget. As part of that process, we undertook quite a detailed consultation, and a number of the ideas that you contributed have now formed part of the budget. Since June, we've had a number of different engagement events with the public, with webinars, with community groups and businesses as well. And all of those events have contributed to ensure that this budget process is informed by your views. I'm going to hand over to Councillor Malcolm to provide some of the context to our budget position.
When talking about our budget with anyone, it's really important to start a little way back. We've had a decade of austerity, which means a decade, 10 years, of central government giving local government less and less money to provide local services that residents in our towns rely on. So in 2010, we used to receive around £120 million a year in government grants to help us with providing services for people in Luton. But over the last 8 years, one key grant has dropped from 64 million to 11 million a year, a huge reduction in the funding that we have available to provide services for people in Luton. Now, one of the ways that we have coped with that and managed to continue to provide services had been the growth of the airport and income from our airport company. But when coronavirus hit, aviation, to all intents and purposes, shut down, and there has been very, very little flying since the pandemic hit. Now that had a dramatic impact on our budget, and thank you to everyone who signed the petition that we worked up when we knew that this was going to have a massive impact on us. But despite 10,000 or so people from Luton signing that and sending it to central government, they haven't really been forthcoming with any concrete support as yet. They're still in conversation with us and there might be something forthcoming, but it doesn't look like it's going to be any form of grant or anything like that, which is what we really needed. So because of coronavirus impacting so severely on our finances, we had to take some really, really difficult decisions. The defences that we put up against austerity were broken by the pandemic, and we had to make some very tough decisions in our emergency budget. But the thing I would say about that is that we saw the scale of a really, really difficult problem coming towards us, and we dealt with it. We took quick action, and actually we're now in a much better position than some other local councils. In fact, this year's budget for 21-22 that will be presented in February and agreed by full council then only has £1.2 million of new savings within it. And actually, the most important thing about that is that it allows us to not be worrying so much about closing our budget gap, although we absolutely need to keep an eye on all the projects that we've got running to try and make sure that they do deliver the savings that we've outlined. But actually, it allows us to concentrate on our core vision of Luton by 2040 being a place, a town where people can thrive, where no one has to live in poverty, and actually on recovering from the pandemic and its massive impact on our local economy as soon as we're out the other side of it. So we've got time and capacity to focus on recovery because we have dealt with our budget position. I'll pass back to Robin now.
Thanks, Andy. And as I said at the start, thank you so much for sending in your comments and questions. We've grouped your questions into themes to try and cover as much ground in this 20 minutes as possible. So I'm going to ask the first question of Andy. Andy, why are you raising council tax, in particular in the context of pay restraint and freezes, and with 3% paid for adult social care?
Thank you for asking this question. I think the simplest answer is that we don't have any choice. this is essentially dictated by central government. So they've taken millions and millions of pounds of grant support away from local authorities and given us the ability to raise council tax within the referendum limits. So it's not really a choice when they've taken so much money away from us, and this is one of the only ways that we have of balancing our budget year on year. So all of central government's analysis of how much money we have to spend on local services assume that we take the council tax at 2% and the adult social care precept at 3%. So this is really a decision being made in central government, given the context we're in locally, about the parameters for choice that we have. A couple of points I would make about this more broadly, though, is that we do actually have the 5th lowest council tax for a unitary authority, so the type of local authority that we are, in the country. And we're the lowest council tax in Bedfordshire, so you pay on average £163 a person less in Luton than you do in other local authorities in the area. And a really, really important point is that some of the work that we've done around Luton Airport, despite the dramatic impact that COVID has had on aviation, still nets a huge positive gain for people in Luton. There's some analysis in our capital programme report that comes to budget at this time of year, which shows that if we didn't have the income from our investments in commercial activity, including the airport, to make the services that we're going to be delivering this year stack up, we would need an extra £500 per household on council tax on a Band D property. Now, obviously, we wouldn't be able to do that, so it would look like dramatic reductions in service. But the point is, we have huge amounts of income coming in from commercial activity despite the pandemic. And I think that's something in Luton we can all really be proud of and pleased about, because it does mean we get better services than we would otherwise have, given the funding constraints that we find ourselves in.
Thanks, Andy. So the second question was about the town centre and what improvements will people see to the look and feel of the town centre, and I'll take this one. Town centres up and down the country have been absolutely ravaged, and the pandemic has seen that progression accelerate as more people shop online and less people shop in retail units. Thankfully, before the pandemic, we'd started the process of putting in place a new and exciting master plan for the town centre, and that process is ongoing. And through that master plan, we'll be looking to attract investment into the town centre, also creating jobs. Now, whilst as Andy's laid out, the local authority doesn't have the revenue that we would like to do everything that we want to do, we do have some capital ability to invest in projects if those projects can deliver a return to the council that then helps to protect services to yourselves. So we've got a number of projects that we're looking to invest in, and some of those projects will be starting within the next 12 months. So, for example, we've got a new park in Silver Street area in the town centre that will turn a disused old car park site that is unable to be used because it runs over the River Lee and the shelving needs to be replaced. We'll turn that into a new riverside park. In addition, the Bute Street car park will be looking to work with a developer to bring that scheme forward and to deliver a new commercial offer for the town centre. We're working with developers to bring forward the investment in George Street in the ABC cinema site. We'll be working with Network Rail to see investment in the train station, and obviously working with our partners, the football club, to bring forward the Power Courts site, which is so vital to the future of the town centre. So over the next few years, there will be a number of projects that will see our town centre look and feel different, and hopefully create a new, vibrant and positive future for the Luton Town Centre. So moving on to the next question. Andy, what's the council doing to improve standards of street cleanliness?
Thank you for those who asked this question. As you know, a local councillor, someone who lives in the ward that I represent, this is one that I really personally care about as well. And what we've done at the council is, despite having to manage our revenue budget, we have managed to find some savings that we had to be able to invest in increased fly tipping teams to address some of this. It is only for a limited period at the moment, but we're hoping that with the work of local residents across the town, we'll be able to increase our recycling rates, which will allow us to keep this enhanced level of fly tipping teams in place. And the really important thing about these fly tipping teams is that it's not just going and clearing up fly tipping, it's going and clearing it up, but also investigating it, finding evidence and enforcing against those who are littering and fly tipping, because this is really important because it is illegal. These are criminal acts and people should not be doing this. And enforcement is key to changing behaviour around this in our town so that we all get to enjoy clean and safe streets. Another thing just on the side that we've done is to change our policy on side waste so that we are clearing bags that are left out by bins to a limited extent and making sure that people know that that's not acceptable and it won't go on forever. But we've changed some of that policy just to address those issues as best we can for the moment.
Thanks, Andy. Leading on from that, why is the council now starting to charge for green waste for the first time and pushing up council tax at the same time?
Yeah, so this isn't not something we were considering doing this time last year, but then we had the pandemic crisis, its massive impact on our budget, and we had to set an emergency budget. And actually, green garden waste is not a universally accessed service, so it's something that it does cause us to think about when something is not universally accessed by all Luton residents. Yeah, it costs all Luton residents because not everyone has a garden. So a couple of things to say about this. Other councils do this. We are joining a large proportion of councils who already charge for green garden waste. We believe that there will be take up and it will cover the costs of running the service. A couple of things that people can do if they don't want to pay for, I think it's 8 to 12 garden waste collections a year. They can, and the details are on the council website of that if you want to look at that. You can buy a composting bin, so we're selling them very cheaply, £5 for a 220 litre bin on our website. You can get in touch to explore that. And the other thing is you can still use the tidy tips. So it's just, we're changing the services because we're in such a stark and challenging financial position. We had to make difficult changes and difficult decisions that we weren't considering making otherwise.
Thanks, Andy. The next set of questions were around the economy. And what's the council doing to help create more jobs to boost the economy? And to answer this, I would say that pre-COVID, things were going really well in Luton. Back in 2018, we were the #1 place in the country for private sector job creation. And even better than that, we were the #1 place in the country for private sector salary growth as well. So things were going really well. Not just because of the positive growth at the airport, but generally because the economy was performing really positively in Luton. Now, since the onset of COVID, we've put in place our inclusive economy strategy, which is part of our 2020 to 2040 eradicating poverty strategy that Andy mentioned earlier. And that strategy is looking to invest and looking to ensure that our skills pipeline is right, to ensure that our population, our residents, that you are linked up with the fantastic jobs that we have been creating and will create. We're confident that the airport will recover and that the airport will continue to deliver further jobs. And we're seeing substantial development even during the pandemic, even during these economically tough times. We're seeing investment up in Butterfield and a number of other sites around the town that will bring additional jobs. So all in all, we are confident and remain positive about the future for Luton's economy, and also about our ability to deliver that eradicating poverty strategy. Next question for Andy. Andy, why are you lending money to the airport company? And why is the airport company, where's the funding from the airport company going to charity and not being used to keep council tax rises low?
Thank you for this question. I think a really important place to start with the airport and our ownership of it is that we own it on behalf of the people of Luton, and we look after it and manage it as best we can for the people of Luton. And to reiterate something that Robin just said, actually, we are confident that in time there will be recovery. And actually, when you stand back from that, it would be crazy to do anything other than to ensure that Lau can continue to operate moving forwards. So the money that's being lent to Lau is for a combination of capital projects, which are things that are already underway that can't be ceased once you've started them, but also making sure that Lau has the ability to draw down on some of its reserves to get through this challenging time. And it's really important for people to understand that actually in 2012-13, the council got £7 million in total from the airport company. Yet even with COVID this year, the council had £22 million of income from the airport company because of the interest payments that the airport makes to the council for money borrowed. So it is still a vital source and a significant source of income to the local authority that helps to provide for local services and to keep council tax low, essentially. Why does some of the Lau funding go to charity? Well, charities are so important across the Luton context to provide really quite vital services to those who are most vulnerable across our communities. They're a vital part of supporting our communities to thrive, to get through COVID, but also out the other side. And I think most people would agree that that funding is really important for Luton as a whole.
Thanks, Andy. And I'll take the final question, which is, what's the council doing to provide more affordable homes, particularly more council housing? And to answer that, I'd say that the council is doing a lot. We do have a housing revenue account build programme, and that sees us increasing the number of council properties that will be delivered over coming years, following the removal by the government of the rent cap. And we've also set up, or the council's also set up a wholly owned housing company called Vauxhall Homes. And Vauxhall Homes is developing a number of sites around the town, and will be developing more sites as we go forward to deliver much needed affordable homes for Luton's people. In addition to that, we've got a temporary accommodation property scheme where the council is going out and buying properties in and around Luton. And that's been a very, very successful scheme to date. And the council is, as part of this budget, will be delivering more investment into property over coming years. And we're working with private landlords through our Luton Lets company that helps to ensure that people can get into private sector rented accommodation that is appropriate and of a good standard. So in conclusion, thank you once again for all your comments and questions. We have fed your ideas. A number of the ideas that residents have contributed to us are now part of the budget and have fed into the budget process. This process now runs through to the 17th of February, when full council will review and decide on the budget for the next financial year. So from Andy and myself, a big thank you for taking the time to listen today, and thank you also for your involvement and your contribution. Thanks a lot.